Wake up, honey. There's a new draft mode. Hey everybody, Espira, and we're back with another Dragon Ball Fusion World video. This time we're going into some details about the future draft mode in Fusion World Digital, or what Bandai is calling it, Select Match. Not only do we have the release date, we actually have some details about how specifically it's going to work. So without further ado, let's go check it out. So on the client, actually, if you go into the notice section, or the moment you log in, if it's been a while or there's been an update today, so since the update, you'll actually see up here the Select Match notice. So Select Match is what they're calling the draft mode, and it refers to an event, and it's in the events tab, but this is very specifically a mode, at least in the way that they've talked about it and the way that they announced about it. So we'll go through the details here, and then we'll hash out what it really means. So implementing the new Select Match battle mode. On July 25th, the new battle mode Select Match will kick off. There will be exclusive missions to celebrate the arrival of this new mode, which is nice. That means at the very minimum, there's going to be some form of quests to allow us to be able to play this mode and get some rewards out of it, on top of what are going to be potential rewards from actually doing well in the event, which is nice. Take part in select game match and claim victory against rivals across the world. How to play. Join a select match by using 150 gems or a single ticket. You can join a select match. I'm not gonna lie, 150 gems is pretty solid. This is what some people would refer to as a phantom draft. You do not get to keep the cards, and honestly, that would be actually insane. You build 40 card decks, which it goes into, and assuming that it's like any other draft mode in any other game where you're gonna be drafting rares and SRs, the fact that you could keep the cards would be a little bit crazy. So it's 150 gems though. I think that's pretty decent. It allows you to be able to draft once every 3-ish days for free, I think, ballpark. If that math adds up, or there's single tickets, which presumably tickets are going to come from missions, quests. Doubt you're going to get them often, but the fact that there's alternative routes that they're willing to give you some free runs at the select match mode is awesome. So 150 gems, I'm happy. It's good enough. $1.50 to be able to run draft modes, especially with how many games there are potentially. Seems really nice. And then of course, the value in that will come where the rewards are, which we don't have any information on that right away. Build a deck from randomly displayed cards. So first you get to choose a leader from among 3, so 1 in 3 choice as to how you're going about your deck. And your deck is comprised of 40 cards, which typically, obviously, in Fusion World is between 50 and 60, here a lower amount. 2 groups of 1 to 3 cards will display on your left and right. Choose the group you'd like to choose until you have a 40 card deck. The fact that there are groupings is a little bit weird to me. There are other digital TCGs out there that do groupings. Shadowverse, for example, is one where it's called Pick 2. Obviously, you have the Pick 1 modes like Hearthstone's Arena or MTG Arena, or just MTG's draft modes. But the fact that it's a random amount of 1 to 3 cards is very interesting. And I wonder what the groupings will be. And when we start analyzing how good certain leaders are, will really depend on the way that the game groups certain cards. Are they going to be grouped based on synergies, or is it just random groupings that they're slapping cards together? That's where the question mark is going to be. And when we're talking about a game that's archetype oriented, kind of like how Fusion World is, you use 7 archetypes and you have your ramp archetypes and stuff like that, and they all require a certain level of synergy to kind of come together. Maybe that's how they're going to get around those cards being bad by themselves. And we're going to take a greater look at that when we look at the card pool right after, just get a sense of how things may go. And then you go on and you draft until you get your 40 card deck. Start matchmaking using your finished deck. You'll be paired with another player, also waiting for a match after confirmation, standard battle. So it's a typical game. Nothing changes outside of just the deck building and the fact that you're in an event. I will say this is also the first time that we're going to be in an event queue, and we're actually going to see that right here. Get rewards based on your wins and losses. The select match will conclude after a total of 7 wins or 3 losses, a withdrawal, or when the end of the event period has been reached. I don't know what the event period has been reached means, if this is like a permanent game mode, but it probably just means that if there's ever some special queues that run with like extra prizing, then you will be kicked out if you end up sticking around past that period. Once finished, the amount of wins up to that point will be used to determine any rewards. So no confirmation on if you get rewards for sure just for jumping in, but there are some kind of rewards that they're going to be talking about. And then in terms of when are we going to be able to jump in, that's July 25th at 9 a.m. UTC. And for people in North America, that ends up being at about 2 a.m. or 5 a.m., which is kind of standard for their updates. And then Europe, I'm sorry, you guys are just going to have to figure it out on your own. I don't know your time zones. Event period details can change without prior notice, obviously, depending on how the patch goes and if they're going to have to make any hotfixes or anything like that. Thank you for understanding, and thank you for your continued support. So something I want to touch base on before we take a look at the card pool and give ourselves a cursory look through at what things may play out meta-wise for this new draft mode, I think something very important to note is the fact that we're getting this whole queue system, right? At the moment, the only way that we've been able to play games is either tabled games or the ranked slash free matches, which are just one-offs. We haven't really had a system built in that we've been able to access that allows us to be able to play multiple games under certain rule restrictions, under certain deck usages. And this is actually almost exactly the way that MTG does a lot of its event modes and so on and so forth in MTG Arena. That's very interesting when you consider that this is the same way that MTG Arena and Shadowverse, for that matter, actually do queuing for their championships. And we've already know that Bandai has announced that digital tournaments, queuing, what have you, is coming to the digital platform. We're going to be able to play, maybe not specifically regionals, but there's supposed to be some sort of way to be able to play in a championship series on the digital client, or at least qualify for one. With the fact that they've implemented this queue system that actually tracks your wins across a specific event, I am specking that this is actually going to be the same system we're going to be utilizing to be able to qualify for some kind of future championship style event, which has me very excited. I think that is much better than the alternative that I was expecting, which is kind of the Yu-Gi-Oh! DC Cup model, where you're just expecting people to grind their lives away for like 72 hours until maybe they end up in like the top 3. So that's really rough. I'm glad that we're going with the system. My speculation is that this is the system we're going to be utilizing for future things, but we don't know. That's just a spec, but just something to think about. With that said, let's go check out the card pool and get ourselves a cursory idea of what we're to expect with this new draft mode and how we should go about it. When it comes to draft modes, there are some standards that you want to apply to yourself when it comes to your deck building and the way that you think that the games will play out. You do not have the consistency of being able to play your best cards, having as much removal as you want. So with those in mind, you need to lean on just good cards more often than not. And when you're drafting, make sure to be able to draft removal as much as you can and things of the sort. In that sense, hyper synergistic leaders don't do so well, specifically because they have a certain amount of cards that they need to work. The biggest, culprit of that, I would say, is Goku Black. Do not, you could, but I would never recommend trying to play Goku Black if you're trying to succeed. It's one of those things where, one, you're a crit leader, which means you see less cards, which allows you to be able to dig less into your deck. Two, most of your deck really only works under the guise of being like a big combo deck that utilizes a bunch of different pieces. And already the constructed version of Goku Black wasn't even consistent in set 1, and that's you being able to run as many of the cards that you needed and wanted in that deck. Now, in this world, sure, there's more cards available in the card pool, but you still need to be able to draft them. So when we're looking at leaders like, say, Goku Black, like Ginyu, these are leaders that are hyper synergistic, require a ton of different cards to work, and in a dense capacity. So in that regard, I would not recommend drafting these leaders unless you're just trying to meme around. At the end of the day, this is a for fun game mode. So I highly recommend just having fun with it as well. In that same sense, I think green could be really tough depending on how much ramp you are given. Things like the androids obviously require a handful. In general, I think the green leaders are going to be a really tough position, besides maybe Broly. And Broly can get by because a 25k lead body can be something that's actually tough to punch through in a limited format, but even then, maybe not really, because Broly won't have the necessary removal consistently to be able to manage boards in which, honestly, drafting vanillas might actually be the route because they're just consistent bodies that have good combo power. So in general, I think green could be a little bit of a tough pick. It depends how they do the piling, of course. At the end of the day, how they structure those out are going to be the most defining factor in terms of the viability of these tougher leaders. So if we're not looking for hyper synergistic leaders or leaders that require a bunch, what are we looking at? Well, realistically, we're looking at our generic leaders. Frieza was amazing in the starter deck format and continues to be amazing in this format as well. There's no doubt about that because it works with every single yellow card and it allows you to get additional value. It makes it harder for your opponent to move the board. And like I was saying, removal is at a premium when you're looking at these types of formats. And because of that, the fact that you're taking away the ability for your opponent to be able to contest your board via combat makes a huge deal. And then Frieza, yellow in general just has the things that are really good when it comes to limited gameplay. In as far as just having a lot of things that allow you to rest mode your opponent's battle cards and manipulate the way that the field plays out, that could put them in really uncomfortable positions in terms of mitigating their board while they can't do much to yours. In a similar vein, when we look at other blue leaders that are more generic, Trunks could be really sweet. Vegeta, obviously really strong because no matter how weak your main deck may be, you still always have your leader to lean on that swings for 35k. So in that regard, very, very solid leader as well. And then when we're looking at red, obviously, starter queue, I presume the starter deck leaders are all going to be in this card pool. If they're not, then I'm not gonna lie, the starter deck leaders are some of the best at doing what they do. The only exception I'll say to the crit leaders, because I don't particularly like cooler, nor do I like Goku Black. I think Beerus is actually kind of hot because you've got his activate main to be able to neg something by 10. And because of that, it's built-in removal, which actually makes him pretty saucy. Universe 7, most good red cards are Universe 7 anyways, so could be a good consideration there. But obviously, if you're not able to draft into Universe 7, not as good. Thankfully, most red cards are Universe 7, so there's that to consider. So in terms of leaders, just generic good stuff. The starter deck leaders are all pretty solid just because they're well built to work with just cards in general and don't require too much to function. I think Beerus could have some really nice niche positions as well. And then Trunks can do all right because, hey, he's removal built into a body and he's a more generic blue leader. In terms of battle cards, things to look forward to. This is where I think the piling is really weird, right? They say you're going to get piles of 3 to 1 card depending, which makes me question the viability of like archetypes. Does that mean that any time that I'm offered a Basil, I also get, say, a Caulifla, or I get a Kefla, or something of the sort, right? Do I get a Goku? Do I get a Gohan? How are these piles going to come together to allow me to be able to play more synergistic strategies? Because if that's not the case, well, then these cards become really bad. Anything that allows you to search up for a Universe X card or for any other archetype becomes significantly worse if they're not grouped together with other cards of their archetype when you are drafting. I presume that's why they have them grouped together. And then for the one-ofs, like, hey, you only get one of this, it's like you only get one of hit. So we're not too sure about that. That's a lot of speculation on my side. But it's something to consider that anything that's archetype based, archetype tied, is only ever as good if they come in piles. And even then, if you get offered an opportunity to be able to draft Basil plus 2 other tournament power cards, I would only really do that if it's later in the draft where I already have a good tournament power pool, as opposed to starting with it super early on and maybe just kind of having a dead card after that. And then from there, it's just good consistency pieces, right? Like just play good cards. So what do good cards look like? Well, like I was saying, removal is super solid. So when we're looking at, let's go to red. When we're looking at our SR pool in terms of what we can use, obviously, if you get a chance to draft a Son Goku SR, incredibly strong just because built-in removal, a Son Gohan able to board wipe. And anything of the sort. Obviously, this Gohan is amazing and constructed, so in draft it would be good as well. When you're looking in blue, very similar. Peel off could be a little bit tough, but I think peel off is pretty safe because you can just draft into a lot of Earthlings. And honestly, in draft, if you end up drafting into peel off, like a good number of them, or maybe even just 2 or 3, and you're playing like Trunks, I think that makes it a very tough spot for your opponents to come back from when you're just fighting against that value turn over turn over turn. On the green front, you just need to draft ramp, man. Like, you just need to be able to push into the late game, and then the most you can draft in terms of being able to remove stuff off the board. So things like this Vegeta and the Gohans honestly play really solidly into a draft format. I think lean you into a really good spot. There's no secret, SRs are obviously incredibly strong, and the opportunities that you have to be able to draft into SRs, go for it. I think it's well worth it, especially in draft. The fact that removal can be so light, just being able to use Gohan just for his destruction ability, even if you don't get a Trunks to be able to play off of him, I think puts it in a really good pickup. So generally, I think very safe to be able to pick up SRs for the most part. And then in yellow, like I said, anything that allows you to be able to control board. If you're playing Frieza, being able to get Bulma is actually insane. I think you just auto win if that happens. But the 1-drop Friezas obviously help you be able to mitigate early board, which is great. I would avoid the Ginyu stuff unless you already drafted into a lot of it, because obviously being able to playing Ginyu but not having Ginyu pieces can be kind of tough. And then otherwise from there, if you're able to draw any SRs, then obviously that is insane. This card's insane in draft. This card pretty good. Every SR gets exponentially better in draft because of the fact that they're usually tied in removal or some powerful effect. So something to consider there. Things like this Golden Frieza though are actually probably ass, and I would not recommend them. And it goes without saying, but every single double striker comes at a premium. So if you get the opportunity to be able to draft any double strikers, you should probably do it, because having a 2 life out to your opponent, in which these might be a little bit tough to draft, is very, very much recommended. I didn't want to get too much in the weeds in regards to what we should play, but I think it was a worthwhile discussion of, hey, if you're looking to jump in on the 25th, I unfortunately can't stream it on release day. I think just having a good overview of like kind of the things to expect as you're going into your draft, especially since we don't totally know the format, can put you at least in a better position to do well. I'm super excited for this draft mode, and I'm going to be grinding it so much. Unfortunately, I'll be at San Diego Comic-Con throughout the weekend, but once we come back, you guys already know I'm going to be grinding out video after video after video and stream games of this new mode. So with that said, I'll catch you guys on the next one.